Good morning, I'm Linda O'Sullivan. I'm the Chief Executive of Dorset Mind, and I'm absolutely delighted because I've got with me this morning one of the team, Nick Rowe. He is our project manager who leads Dorset's Mental Health Alliance programme. Good morning, Nick.
Morning, Linda.
Really good to have you here. We're talking today about not just men's mental health, but actually International Fathers' Mental Health Awareness Day. And I'm slightly embarrassed because I'm very aware of Father's Day. And having joined Dorset Mind 5 months ago, I've now come to learn that there is an international event to raise awareness in regards to fathers' mental health. And I'm really interested, Nick, to hear from you today about what is that day about? How has it come about? And fundamentally, what are the issues that it's trying to address and raise awareness of?
I think it's a wonderful development that fathers across the world are going to get that focus. Because I think, in different countries, there's lots of enlightened places where fathers do get the focus, and I'd like to think that in Britain maybe people do consider fathers, and I think it's becoming much more on the agenda than it's ever been before, and that's a fantastic thing. But there will be other pockets of the world where it's seen as weakness to admit that you're maybe struggling sometimes with your mental health. So how fantastic to sort of have a worldwide focus on this subject and its importance, because we all want to be the best parent we can ever be. We're not going to be able to do that if we're struggling ourselves with our mental health. So I think it's wonderful to have that focus and to really drill down into the issues that we all experience as fathers. It's not always, or being any parent, it's not always easy. There are going to be challenges. There's going to be time where you need to ask for help and shouldn't be afraid to ask for help and admit that you don't have the answers.
Okay, so this International Day really is important, isn't it? And I'm slightly cringing here with embarrassment because as a mother of three, my children were born about 25 years ago. I will not deny that, I probably didn't, in fact, I didn't give any attention to the mental health needs of my children's father. Are we seeing now more and more a sort of societal shift to ensure that men's mental health, when it comes to newborn and becoming a new father, is that really becoming something that we have ignored?
Yeah, I think it has. I've been a father nearly 20 years, and even going back 20 years, I think men were just expected to cope. It wasn't about the man, was it? It was about the woman who was having the baby. And don't get me wrong, that's a far harder deal than just standing and watching. But nevertheless, you want to be the best father you can, and you need help with that. And you should, I think one of the things that I did, and I think, I'd recommend, is I wasn't afraid to reach out. And my son has 3 godfathers because I have 3 fantastic friends, best friends, and I just thought, well, I can't choose 2 from 3, so I'm going to have 3. They have wonderful relationships with him, and they're, as I say, they're very different people, but they bring something different to his life. And it's really important, I think, as a father, to acknowledge the fact that you don't have all the answers. And therefore, and I always say this to my son, I say, look, if you can't talk to me about an issue, there's all these people in your life who love and care for you. Speak to them. You don't have to, maybe you're embarrassed to talk to me about something. So reach out and talk to them. And I think he would, and he probably does.
I think it's interesting there because what you've talked about is you seem to have created your own personal network for your son and yourself. But just tell me about that. Take me back to when your son was born and share with what you will this morning. But what were the issues for you? Were there societal pressures of you know, the macho, having to cope, having to be the strong one. Was that real for you?
Yeah, I think it was a difficult pregnancy. It really, you know, it was. I don't want to go into too much detail, but there was a lot of anxiety around that, and so we weren't sure how well he would be when he was born. So that meant that we had a lot of pent-up stress and anxiety around that. And we were very lucky. We were very blessed. You know, when he was born, he did go into special baby care for a few days or maybe a week. But actually that was more to do with his weight. The underlying health issues that had been a great concern actually weren't a problem. And so we were very lucky and feel very blessed to be in that position. But I think, you know, from day one, you feel you have to be the strong guy, don't you? You feel you have to be the person who copes, because it's a massive shock, actually, sometimes to have a baby, you know, both for the man and for the woman. But no one tells you how to be a parent. There are books you can read, but there's nothing like real experience, and everyone's experience is different. And so, you know, you feel you should be the strong person, and you should be there for your wife who's going through all these physical challenges and also emotional challenges. What have you got to experience? What have you got to worry about? You've just got to, you know, be there and support her. But actually, that in itself puts you under a lot of pressure. Yeah,
and I suppose as well, I'm having a guilt moment now, thinking back to my own children's father, because I think the network and the support and information is definitely there for women. But I think it's interesting what you talk about there, because where then did you take your anxieties? Because obviously I imagine you didn't want to overload your partner, your wife, and also the impact of having a baby brings with it, for many of us, financial pressure. And again, not saying this is the norm, because it's not always the case that you know, fathers are the main earners, but mainly so. Where did you get your support? Was it from your friends, or did you just find that you were having to work your way through this sort of...
No, I mean, I was fortunate. You know, I mean, I've always been a person who's going to reach out for help if I need it. And I think that's the first thing to acknowledge to yourself, that you should feel able to do that. But I think things have changed a lot for the better in the last 20 years. I mean, I think I got 48 hours paternity leave.
Right, okay.
The pregnancy, the birth started on Christmas Eve, and he was born on the 28th, so that didn't even cover labour. So then you're back at work, aren't you? And you're back sort of with your brain scrambled, and you're exhausted, and you're trying to do this two-role thing, you know. And I sort of, one of the things that I did with my wife, and I'm really pleased that she was able to take this on board, is I said, look, if I get a good night's sleep, then I'm going to be able to help you when you're at your lowest, when I get home from work and you've had the baby all day and you're completely destroyed physically, and I can take over at that point. But it's not going to work if I'm disturbed all the way through the night, like you're going to be with breastfeeding. So can I suggest, delicately, I go in the spare room and I get a good night's sleep so I can help you.
But I think it's just interesting, because again, that then can, I mean, you sound as if you'd worked that one out with your partner, your wife, but it can then bring another issue for the relationship, can't it? And again, another sense of disconnect for men, not just from the fact that the worries around having a newborn, but their relationship with their partner. And I wondered, is there enough support now? You say things have changed dramatically. I can fundamentally sort of relate to it, because I think there was very little support for my children's father, and it was very much about he was the one that was going to bring in the money at that time to allow us to not worry about that one. But I think it's interesting listening to you, because I think, where are the changes for men then? What has happened that's allowing the difference to occur, and has it got to the point where we have done enough, or is there more to be done in relation to supporting men in preparing for becoming a father?
Well, I think there is a societal shift, firstly, and that's a really positive thing. There is an acknowledgement that fathers are part of this process too, and that they need help and support. So that's great. and that's the first and most important thing. But beyond that, of course, where do they go? You know, not everybody is as fortunate as I am to have this network of male friends or family. My family were very supportive as well. People can't always rely upon that. People can't always rely upon their extended family. They may not have an established network of friends who are particularly interested or want to get involved. And so I think, you know, I would just encourage men out there who are first-time fathers and are struggling to reach out to other organisations that we can sort of put onto a list for them, so that they actually aren't afraid to sort of get in touch and say, you know, I'm struggling with this aspect of it, I'm struggling with that aspect of it. And there's more and more groups all the time to support these people, and we should encourage them to reach out and get it.
I'm just wondering though, because the reality is, and I don't, you know, again, I don't want to generalise, but from my experience, women tend to have a stronger network in their life in terms of talking about specific issues and connecting. And when one is pregnant and preparing to become a mother, the whole system is wrapped around usually the mother. So I'm just wondering how now today can men who are in, you know, preparing to be a dad, how can they reach out for that support? Where is it? Who do they talk to?
Well, I think in the first instance they should speak to their GP, see what connections they have in their local community, look at charities, look at organisations like Dorset Mind, look at what we do for parents and for fathers, and really just, you know, seek the help they need, whatever that is. And we're all different, aren't we? We'll need different support depending on what particular experience we're going through.
In terms of International Father's Mental Health Day, is there something in that awareness raising that there is a need possibly to be looking at how we influence policy change around support for men when it comes to, you know, becoming fathers?
Totally, yeah. I mean, there'll be fathers, won't there, who are politicians who are going through all these experiences themselves, and it will resonate with them, and they're the people who can make the changes that are necessary. So yeah, we should definitely be taking these issues to the place where law and policy are made, and trying to affect that policy, whether that be on a local level with what's happening with provision in Dorset, or whether that be on a national level with what's happening in Parliament. Because if they don't know about the issues, if those issues are not brought to their attention, then they're not going to make the changes that are necessary to give the support that's needed.
I mean, I suppose never before have we seen so much of attention being placed on attempting to break down the stigma around mental health. We've got some prominent people in our communities, including, you know, royalty, who are raising awareness and acting as ambassadors to challenge the stigma and to encourage people to talk more. If we were to move forward in 10, 20 years, what would good look like for Dorset and men's mental health?
Well, when I said, you know, people should feel able to reach out to their GP, that's only going to work if the GP then has an awareness of all the organisations that are out there to support anybody who's struggling. And so it's really important that we do have connections through the PCNs to work directly with GPs, so that they are informed, so that they know what's out there. Because I think there is a recognition more and more through the medical professions that actually just throwing pills at things is not the solution. You know, that actually there's a time and a place for some help, whether it be antidepressants or whatever. But there's also, you need a much more holistic approach to this issue, and that there are many solutions and many ways of coping with life that don't require medication, and that's actually a really important part of the solution.
And I think
so they need to be informed.
Yeah, I think you're right. I wonder as well, though. I mean, you were talking about when your son was born and the amount of time you had off from work, and yes, things have changed, but still, you know, in terms of adapting and getting back into the reality of work and you've just either had a traumatic experience of birth, your partner either being, as you described with your wife, is there therefore, in your opinion, a need for employers to be addressing not just men's mental health, but their employees' well-being in a different way than just thinking that an extra week off is the answer?
I think that's hugely important, and it's. I think one of the few sort of benefits and bonuses to take out of COVID has been this whole new approach to the way we work. And everyone is looking about how we work and how we work flexibly. And the truth is that any organisation, and Dorset Mind, everybody who works for Dorset Mind has a wellness action plan. And that's not just a tick box exercise in sitting people down and saying, well, what makes you feel happy? How do you how do you relax? It's a really entrenched within the way we work, an acknowledgement that actually if you consider the whole person, if you consider all the aspects, and we all have busy, complex lives, if you consider all the aspects of those lives and try and help that person, and Dorset Mind does follow through with that. We have regular check-ins to make sure that everything's working and to see if there's any help that the company can provide. And this is a really enlightened way of employing people. And of course, it's a win-win situation. It's not just about looking after the welfare of the employee, but if the employee is happy, if they're feeling supported, if they're feeling that they've got all the ingredients they need to live a sustainable and happy existence, they'll be a better employee. They'll work better for you.
Can I just take you back then? So when you then did have to go back to work,
yeah.
I mean, I was in a very privileged position of being able to take, I had a year off with all three of my kids. The idea of going back into work any sooner, I just think would have been, I'd have been, on my knees. Can you just share with us when you did go back into work, and you did have access to sounds like a really good, strong network of friends, but what was going on for you in terms of your well-being? What one thing would you say could have been different with your employer, if anything?
Well, and I don't wish to judge too harshly because it's a product of the times, but the truth of the matter is, you'd been away for your period of time, you'd had a baby, but actually they just wanted you back as an employee. They weren't really terribly engaged or interested. They asked the question, oh, how's Sally? How's the baby?
But would you say? I mean, I wonder. I mean, I'm just thinking now. Is it the sign of the times? Is that the reality still today for men going back?
I'm sure it is for some. Yeah, I'm sure it is. But I'd like to think that we've moved somewhere in the last 20 years, and that actually for other employers, they'll understand that they've been through this person's been through this major life change. And they can't, everything won't be the same that it was before. It shifts everything. And so actually the best way they can get the work they want out of you is to acknowledge that and to accept it and to try and work with you. And flexible working is part of that. We live in a digital age. We don't need to be locked into an office in a building in Bournemouth to perform our function adequately. And just that whole thing of taking the commute out of the day could make such a difference to all the many demands you have as a new parent.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm wondering, for you, Nick, what is it that you believe was the one thing that enabled you to stay mentally well when you became a dad, and as that whole that sort of whole new world came upon you?
The support of family and friends.
Okay.
That was the critical thing for me. I don't know whether any organisation existed out there. I suppose Dorset Mind existed, didn't it, 20 years ago? But I wasn't aware of any organisations. I wasn't trying to find out whether there were any organisations to support me. So I was dependent on family and friends, and I was fortunate that those people came through for me and were there for me. But for people now that don't have that, they need an alternative. They need a place to go.
It feels to me that you are very able as an individual and as a man to talk about your emotions and how you're feeling, and acknowledging that, working somewhere like Dorset Mind, we encourage people to bring their whole selves to work. But the reality is, for the majority of men, we know that, don't we? In terms of the issues that we're currently seeing in Dorset for men's mental health. Talk to us about that, because how then can we connect with what you're encouraging the way forward to be? And even though that was 20 odd years ago, we still know that men don't always have the network or the support to open up about their mental health. What are those issues facing?
Well, I think the other thing is one of feeling, can they, should they reach out? You know, and I think there is something perhaps deep in our DNA that tells us that we should just cope, that we shouldn't actually need the support to reach out for the support of others. So I think the most important stigma to break down there first and foremost is to say to people, no, you must and you should, and it's right and proper that you should reach out and ask for help and not be ashamed of it. So I think to take the shame out of it, to take the shame out of the fact that at times all of us struggle, at times some of us can't cope, all of us can't cope, to take the shame out of it and say, you know, encourage men. And I think this is why the Light On campaign has been so important. That actually,
tell us about Light On. What is that about?
Well, it's a recognition. I mean, it's partly based in, if we look at the suicide statistics in Dorset, something like 83% of men who took their own life in 2021 were men. So there's a particular issue there, and so there was the feeling that the whole spirit around Light On was to focus attention specifically initially at men's mental health and looking at how it could support men's mental health. And interestingly, one of the findings from research that was done around that was that actually men tend, unlike me actually, but the majority of men who responded to this survey reach out for the big female role models in their life for help. So their wives, their mothers, people like that. But it doesn't really matter, does it? It doesn't really matter who we reach out to, so long as we feel enabled to reach out.
And I think it's really important, isn't it, that we've got initiatives like Light On in Dorset.
Absolutely.
That works in collaboration with Dorset Mind, because the work that they're doing is showing that maybe what is needed is a different approach to offering support and spaces for men, as opposed to just relying on the medical GP route. I think that's what that's illustrating, isn't it?
Totally. And I mean, the other thing is that there is a fantastic network of businesses that actually support the work of Light On, and that's so important, isn't it? Because it's changing the dialogue within offices. It's changing the mentality of employers and employees, so that it's acknowledged that people will need help and support.
So can I ask you now, I'm just trying to think about, how old is your son now?
So he's 19.
What would you be saying to him as a man who may choose or choose not to become a father? What would you encourage him to be thinking about to ensure that he gets the right support, not just from his dad, but, you know, to ensure his whole mental well-being is as grounded as it can be?
Well, that's a challenging one, really, because unlike me, he's not inclined to reach out when he needs support. What he tends to do is actually just try and cope and try and deal with things himself. So the thing that I would encourage him to do, and I would also get on board the male support group that I've established, because of course one of the problems with your children is they stop listening to you. They stop imagining that you have the answers to any question. And so although I tell him ad infinitum that he should seek help when he needs it from whoever is out there that's there and will support him, I think that message needs to be reinforced, and I'm sure it's reinforced through university, and it needs to be reinforced through the support and role models in his life to say, okay, Seb, if you need help, give me a call.
Yeah.
Come and see me.
I think what's really interesting about that is actually going back, we know things have changed, but the reality is there's still a stigma, isn't there? And there's a bit of sort of, be that men or women, but I think there's something about where do we start in terms of supporting, directing people to support, talking about mental health and men's mental health, and in particular the whole concept of when one does become aware that they're going to be a father.
We need to reach out into all communities, because of course there is still shame attached to men not coping. And it might be a generational thing, because, you know, when you think what our grandparents went through, being involved in the wars, then there was this mentality when you came back from war that if you'd been through that, you know, what was life? You know, what was hard about life? It was so much easier than being at war. And so I think there is a generational thing. And, you know, if we think back to our grandparents, and certainly my grandparents, I never heard him, you know, he served in the First World War. I never heard him talk about any of it. They didn't. They never talked about it. And he would have experienced some terrible things, which would have been good for him to be able to get some counselling about. But of course you didn't in those days. There was no such thing as counselling. There's always work to be done. You know, the job is never done in convincing people that we need to do more, and we need to support fathers and all parents in a much wider way. And so I think reaching out into every community within Dorset and making sure that they feel part of that conversation, and hopefully an acknowledgement that every father needs support, irrespective of their cultural background or their generation.
International Fathers' Mental Health Awareness Day falls the day after Father's Day. So what's your message to new fathers, men that are discovering that their partners are pregnant, they're going to become a father, fathers in general, in terms of Father's Day and mental well-being? What's your message to people out there?
Well, I suppose we've focused, haven't we, a lot today, Linda, on the negative side of being a father. So it's really important just to put out there that it's the most wonderful thing to be. It's the most wonderful privilege to be a father. And so in all the sort of preparation that you make for being a father and thinking about how that's going to work, and of course you don't know what sort of child you're going to have, so you can make all these plans of things you're going to do with your son, in my case when he was born, but of course he's a different child from the one that I imagined would be born. But you know, don't lose sight of of how amazing it is to be a father. Have that incredible experience is such a privilege. But then prepare for it. It does help to hear about the experience of others, but talk to people who have been fathers, and talk, you know, because hopefully if you've got close friends who have been parents, they'll open up to you and tell you what it was really like. You know, not the public persona, not what you saw when they were coming round to your house, but how they actually felt about being a father. And it's just my experience, and I feel I'm lucky, and I do feel this is what I would hope for all fathers, is that I've been very blessed with my friendships, that people were there to listen to me, but also to share, because it's much easier if you hear from people who have gone through challenges themselves and how they've overcome them. That really helps you to hear that.
So this year we've got International Fathers Mental Health Awareness Day. New fathers listening to this, or men who are just generally wanting to reach out and need to talk in a space that allows them to feel safe. What would you advise? How do people get support across Dorset?
There's a whole range of organisations that actually help men with their mental health. So I would say reach out to them, pick up the phone, send an email. Don't be afraid to actually seek that help. And it depends what specific area of parenthood you're struggling with. But the organisations do. There are something like 7,500 organisations in Dorset, sort of voluntary organisations. So there's a massive network.
Before we say goodbye to you, Nick, just share with us one of the most poignant, joyful and stressful moments of becoming a father with us that you can just remember and have joy thinking about.
Well, nothing can beat that moment that you hold your baby in your arms for the first time. In our particular case, I say the pregnancy and the birth were all a bit challenging. So then to hold this baby in our arms and realise that he was okay, he's had a couple of challenges still ahead of him, but he was okay, is just the most joyful, wonderful thing. And people often say, the birth and everything's amazing. It wasn't my experience, to be honest with you. I find it quite a challenge. But that moment was just special, and I will remember and cherish the rest of my life.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been brilliant listening to you, and I would really hope that anyone that has listened to this podcast today that does feel that they could do with a chat or a conversation, that they connect with many of the organisations that we will leave the details to. But in the meantime, happy International Fathers Mental Health Awareness Day, Nick.
Thanks, Linda. It's been nice to chat.